Hello, this is Reggie Johnson from Fort Worth, Texas. No Paul Smith today from London. He is traveling. I do have Nadio Granada is going to be joining us very shortly from his houseboat on the Thames. Is that where you're at now, Nadio?
It is, Reggie. It's a lovely, warm, sunny day on the Thames here for a change.
Wonderful. Well, as we usually do, we're going to play a little bit of music from undiscovered artists. I'll play part of the song. We'll play the whole thing at the end. This is Parts and Spares, Scream When You Cry. Just an excerpt.
She's falling through her life. The doctors say she's crazy. She's wasted all her time. But the walls are getting closer. The space up in the light. She can hear the traffic hang around where the lovers came round earlier tonight. But you scream when you cry.
Okay, that was Parts and Spares, Scream When You Cry. Great track. I love it when Paul plays that one. Undiscovered artists from, was it from Dublin? I believe. Anyhow, Paul usually runs the music. If you weren't here for the first few seconds, I'll just mention Paul's traveling today. So this is Reggie Johnson from Fort Worth. I've got Nadio Granada with me from the Thames. And we have a number of topics we're going to be going over and some interesting stuff to talk about. So first off, AI hallucinations, a list of books that don't exist, AI prompts left in novels, actual printed novels with AI prompts left in them, AI wave of low quality research, biomedical research, AI misinterprets conclusions, overgeneralizing, and the idea that AI infiltrates all sources with unreliable info. But then Nadia is going to talk to us about 3 ways to stop the spread of unreliable AI info. And we're going to talk about some positives, such as the top 5 AI tools for social media and content creation. And can AI improve critical thinking? We've talked about research that shows that it can harm critical thinking, but there are some important things to look at how when used well. So I'm excited to get into this list. We will start out with list of books that don't exist. So this was an interesting story published in multiple newspapers. Reported by Popverse by Graham McMillan. It was also reported in NPR by Elizabeth Blair. The Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer were 2 newspapers that published a summer section called Summer Heat. And included in that was the list of 15 books recommended for summer reading. And they sounded really interesting. I'm not going to read you all the descriptions, but actually the really interesting part was that 10 of the 15 don't exist. Just were made up by AI. I'm not making this up. And the Chicago Sun-Times apologized and said that, that first off, they didn't generate the list. This was created by a subsidiary of magazine giant Hearst called King Features. And so obviously there was some assumption there by the Chicago Sun-Times that there was an editorial process in place, but they admitted there was no excuse for them not doing their own fact checking. The company King Features that did it, the individual who created this list said, huge mistake on my part, has nothing to do with the Sun-Times. He says that they trust the content. That's 100% on me. That's my mistake. I betrayed that trust. Took full responsibility. He said that he sometimes uses AI to help with the writing, but he always checks it. And this time he didn't. So it's a warning there. Keep a human in the loop. I think what a lot of people are kind of up in arms about is this is at a time when journalists are being laid off and there's the threat of AI taking over newspapers. And then when we show what AI can do for journalism, it comes up with a list of recommended books that don't exist. Meanwhile, as a funny side, Gabino Iglesias, an author who was actually a part of a group trying to file a class action lawsuit against companies using training on their books, said, well, he pointed out how many full-time book reviewers are there in the US today? Very few. And he said that he joked that if people really want to read the fake books described in the text, He and plenty of other authors are ready to deliver. So pay writers, and then we can write these fake books that don't exist. I thought that was a clever twist on that. So there are writers out there ready to write these books for you if you've managed to get a hold of that list of summer reading that was in the Chicago Sun-Times, Philadelphia Inquirer. So sticking with the theme of authors, I will say that a couple people noticed in the book Dark Hollow Academy Year 2, a fantasy book by Lena McDonald. In chapter 3, there was a scene, intense scene, and all of a sudden there appears this statement that says, "I've rewritten the passage to align more with Jay Bree's style, which features more tension, gritty undertones, and raw emotional subtext beneath these supernatural elements." So it appears as though the author had used AI to help write the book, and had asked it to imitate the style of another author, and left behind evidence that they'd done so in the final work. So that's a kind of a humorous thing. And again, another warning to be careful when you are doing these outputs. Now, with those two examples, Nadia, I wanted to ask, just thinking about humans making those kind of mistakes, generating an AI list of books that doesn't exist, leaving your prompts in the novel. Is this a sign of authors not checking the output?
Yeah, I think that's one of the signs. I think it goes deeper than check. It's education, isn't it? We need to educate. We need to, I wouldn't expect you to jump in my car and drive it without having already had some driving lessons, without having passed a test, without being insured. So why are we giving people access to these machines without training them? It's nuts.
That's a really good point. It's like you said, you wouldn't jump in someone else's car and expect them to know, or expect to know how to drive it without learning it. So, well, I'm interested to hear more of your thoughts in a minute when we get to the section on how we can stop the spread of the unreliable info. But as far as teaching people how to use these tools, you have a proposal for that, how we can make sure people know how to use them.
Yeah, I think, Reggie, I mean, it starts with an acknowledgement that AI, yes, it's free, but it's not free. It's to be treated with respect. Rainwater's free, but we're now learning that we have to treat water with respect, and they weren't treating water with respect for the last 200, 300 years, but now finally we're beginning to realize that it's such a thing. So in terms of AI and usage of it, I think we need to have a culture of training people at least to a very base level. And at that base level, you need to be taught that hallucinations happen, but hallucinations are it's a bit, it's lazy use of AI causes hallucinations. It's not the AI that causes it. It's a human that's lazy or ignorant in the way that they deploy it. So let's start on a very basic line. When I see your car on the road, I expect you to indicate left when you're turning left. I expect you to put brake lights on when you're braking. I can predict what you're going to do next because you're giving me signs. We need to have that same attitude with AI. We need to know that when somebody's using AI, we know that they are using it responsibly with guardrails. And if they give you some AI content, we need to have a structure in place that goes, Nadia, Reggie, I'm giving you this in confidence that this has been produced professionally, properly, ethically, and the content is good to go. And if we don't get to that standard, and we don't get to that standard quick, the vessel is going to be overflowing with the nonsense. We need to fill that vessel quickly and effectively with the correct content. And I can give you an example of a historian if you like. I'm talking a lot, so I'll pause. But I had a very recent, really interesting exchange with a historian, and I can explain how that rolled out if you like.
Yeah, well, let's hear about that, and then I'll get to some of these other examples of the spreading of low quality info, and then we'll get into your suggestions for that.
Okay, so to set the context, there was somebody had done a World War II post on Facebook, and they were celebrating victory, V-Day, and I thought it was a great post, and they had written a book relating to it. I write book companions. If you look at a book, a static physical book, it never changes. It's done. It's already out of date as soon as you pick it up. But if you build a GPT for a book, you can delve deeper and you can engage with it, etc. And if you manage that GPT, if you train it to only answer questions that it's been trained to answer and not to make stuff up, then you get a really significant different level of engagement. So I was saying this to this historian, and he was saying to me, we don't like AI. We don't like AI. It makes stuff up. It lies. And he sent me an example of somebody similar to what you said earlier, somebody with a photograph of some sort of Second World War memorabilia, claiming it to be genuine. It was from a different war. It wasn't even Second World War stuff. He was claiming to be an authority in a subject area that is not an authority, etc. So my argument back to him was, well, why don't you fill the airways with genuine AI developed material that is authentic and true, instead of leaving this big gap for others to drive in and fill the airways with the incorrect stuff. Historians, if you are in the business of sharing facts and storytelling, get in there quickly. Get in there before somebody else does. It's not the only way to limit it, but it's a proactive way.
That's I like that. Get in there while you can, because get in there and spread proper information, correct information, guardrails. You said responsible AI. So some other examples of the information that's spreading in Nature, the journal Nature, the scientific journal. Miriam Nadoff wrote an article about how scientific literature is at risk of becoming flooded with papers that make misleading health claims based on openly available data that are easy to process using artificial intelligence tools. So researchers are warning about this because the U.S. National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey is a large database of personal health with different variables, like, say, vitamin D levels, sleep quality, different things, and different health outcomes. And when you're doing research, scientific research, you come up with a hypothesis. We say, we're going to hypothesize that vitamin D is associated with cancer. Like, low vitamin D increases the chance of this type of cancer, or even depression, whatever it might be. And then you run a test to see if indeed vitamin D is related to that. What's called cherry picking is when you take a big set of data and you look for anything that's correlated from a large number of variables, and then you take those ones, don't mention any of the rest, and you say there's a correlation here. Therefore, taking vitamin D will keep you from getting cancer. Well, when you have any large data set, you're going to have items that will reach statistical significance in a scientific level. They'll reach statistical significance, but they're just statistical noise. Because if you have 100 different variables, one of those will reach probably statistical significance. I think the way that they explained it here was, he said that imagine you're trying to pass an exam that has a particular pass rate, and you add as many questions as you want. So you see which ones you get right. You take a 100-question exam. You get 10 of them right. You eliminate 90 questions, leave the 10 there. You got 10 out of 10 right. It's irrefutable. You got it perfect. That's kind of what cherry picking data is like. Now, taking a national, large, huge database and correlating items, and this follows a very specific template, they say, to create easy research, because and this isn't only an AI thing, this is also an industry thing where the pressure to publish is often misaligned with our academic goals, the pressure on scientists, on researchers. And so there's a lot of problems to be discussed in that one. But the idea being, it seems like AI is enabling some lazy researchers or researchers that are anxious to get published to quickly get something out there that looks like a result, but is probably statistical noise. And this is, in fact, the same problem that led to the replication crisis. What was it, 15 years ago, where they started noticing a lot of really interesting effects weren't able to be replicated. And the reason being that part of it is the file drawer effect, where if you don't show an effect, they don't publish it. So it created the same kind of outcome, but this is much quicker at using AI to create statistical noise and make it look like a result. So that's an interesting one. Another one relating to scientific findings, and this was actually another paper by Yui Peters and Benjamin Chen Yi. It was published. This was in April, just recently, just a month ago. It said that generalization bias in large language models summarization of scientific research. So what they said is our results indicate a strong bias in many widely used LLMs towards overgeneralizing scientific conclusions, posing a significant risk of large-scale misinterpretation of research findings. So they compared human summaries of scientific research and AI summaries, and the LLMs were 5 times more likely to contain broad generalizations. And I think that it's always difficult communicating science, which can be highly technical, and communicating research results. Overgeneralization is a problem, especially when people are depending on that for accurate information. And the interesting addition to that, or addendum, is that they found that the newer models tended to perform worse in generalization accuracy than earlier ones. And that made me think of the idea of model collapse, because one of the things we see with model collapse is greater generalization towards a generic norm, less variety, less variance and nuance, and more, just average. And I wasn't sure if, as we see more AI content being consumed by AI, being used to train AI, if these are some of the signs that we've also noted elsewhere of model collapse, which is always something to be vigilant about, because that could be a significant risk to the ways we use AI. I will add one more, and then I want to get back to Nadia here. Is I wrote a post saying that AI infiltrates every knowledge source and it fills it with dangerously unreliable information. Well, why was I writing that? Well, there was a story about a couple of hikers. They went up a mountain, interestingly called Unnecessary Peak, Unnecessary Mountain. Interesting name for a mountain near Vancouver, British Columbia. They went up there and they got in over their heads because it was spring, but there was still snow at the altitude they were at, and they were not dressed accordingly. They had to call a rescue squad to help get them off the mountain. Fortunately, they were okay. They were gotten safely off the mountain, but it turns out that to plan their ill-fated expedition, the hikers heedlessly followed the advice given to them by Google Maps and the AI chatbot ChatGPT. Again, maybe we have a little bit of overgeneralization there, a lack of nuance, a lack of context. I think what Nadia would say to that is you have to know how to use it. These are people that weren't, using it, because if you think about saying where's a good place to go hike, but you don't necessarily dig deep enough into what gear I should bring. And what Tim El-Sheikh, who's an AI creator and influencer, who's very much in a favor of responsible AI, said is that you can't blame the hikers. They don't know better. Above all, they put their trust in these technologies because they've been told by the self-proclaimed AI expert tech bros. You've heard us use that term, tech bros, the tech leaders that have this bro culture, that their models are smarter than humans. They're not, and they never will be, he says. But his thinking is those are who's to blame for making people believe that they can just pop in a prompt and get accurate information that'll give them everything they need to know. And usually, I think one of the areas we're seeing is the lack of context can be dangerous. And interestingly, this wasn't just a one-off. There has been an increase in historic surge in rescue teams being called out, which England and Wales blame on social media and bad navigation apps. A lot of people will leave honeypot spots, as they're called, where there's a beautiful view here, but maybe not the full context. So it's not just AI or social media. It's also individuals not giving enough context where they leave a indication of a good view, or people not looking at their source for enough context. So I wrote, that AI is spreading unreliable information everywhere, often lacking the importance of nuance and context. When I posted that, Nadia had a really good response that I really liked, and I wanted him to talk about it here, because he had started out by saying that rather than retreat, we must respond with discipline, data, and thoughtful design. Nadia, tell us more about ways that we can fight this spread of unreliable info.
Okay, well, thank you. And can I just reflect 1 second on what you said? I was smiling when you were talking about you came up with the word average. When I'm delivering some of my training, my courses, I go back to my lessons on average, and we've grown up with mean. MEAN. That's, if you ask 1,000 people what is the average, they will 99%, I'm guessing, will come up with a mean. But there's a mode and there's a median. And I think these play out now in our content as well. So we're going to get a lot of mean, a lot of average content, but look out for the exceptional content, and then we'll see how that plays out. I also want to just reflect a minute on. I have a meeting at the National Science Museum next Wednesday here in London, and we're just going to talk about stuff, and AI will be amongst that stuff. But I remember going in there, not maybe during COVID or just before or whatever, and I went to the floor on neuroscience, and it showed a man's head in a box, and his head was quite an odd shape. And back in the day, 200 years ago, some scientist or doctor in a white coat claimed that the shape of your head determined your intelligence, your criminality, your sexual motivations. It was all done in the shape of the head. People were being sent to prison on the back of this stuff. Now, Reggie, that then made it into journals. The journals made it into books. The books made it into degree courses, and the degree courses made it into PhDs, and the PhDs started to run our world for us. And and this is where donut economics came from. Kate Rouse said she was sick of reading outdated scientific stuff that was published before it was properly tested. And we're going to get a whole generation of that. To come back to the 3 safeguards, I'm rushing now, but I think if we want to reduce, I'm not saying eradicate, I'm not a magician here, but my thoughts are to reduce the amount of false information that is coming out there. We should have traceable lineage. So number one, traceable lineage. The tool should offer something that I call nutrition labels, a bit like your food. You wouldn't give a child spaghetti bolognese that you buy from a shop that hasn't got labels on it. You might risk it for yourself, but you would not give it to an infant, because there's responsibility and things like that. We should be treating our content with the same labeling care that we do with our food in that sense. So nutrition labels for outputs, listing data source, date, and processing method. Where's it come from? Who wrote it? What was the method? What was the algorithm that was used to produce that, if there was one? Second, human in the loop. Especially in sensitive domains, experts must review and sign off on AI outputs. I see a world where I see Earth 2.0. We're living on Earth 1. I'm looking at Earth 2.0. And on Earth 2.0, life is very different. We're the same, but the tools that we use and everything is very different. And I see a world where I might share with you some AI related content, but you'll get an NDA from me. You can ask me to sign an NDA that says, Nadia, is this genuine content? Where did it come from? Etc. So that's second. And the third is distributed trust networks, peer-reviewed, decentralized content validation that can help filter out flawed AI-generated knowledge before it scales. That's the essence, before it scales. We cannot allow those doctors in white coats from Victorian times writing articles, putting them in books, and you can never pull that back. Once it's out there in a book, or it's even worse now with digital, it doesn't die, does it? So we have to address it's history repeating itself. We just need to be less commercially driven and more truth oriented, I think.
Those are great points, and I love that, and I look forward to a time where we can be more responsible with our AI and with our other tech tools, and I hope that that's the way things go. I will applaud you, Nadia, for your efforts to help bring about responsible AI and raise awareness of this as well. So I do want to mention a couple of positive things. One is the top 15 game-changing AI tools for social media and content creation. This was from Bernard Marr, someone we cite often, and I'll just give his top 5. He gave 15, so you can look at the show notes at prsmith.org/AI-topics, and you can read all 15. But here are the top 5. One is CapCut, a hugely popular video editing tool that lets anyone create and edit and share videos in a very simple way, and with creative templates and allowing you to add your own clips in it, puts them in a way that advanced video editing that you couldn't really take the time to do on your own for social media. My daughter uses it. I'd have to ask her how to use it, but it's actually pretty simple. I probably just need to open it up and try it. Canva Magic Studio. So Canva Magic Studio isn't a separate app. It's the features, the magic features that come with Canva Pro. And a lot of them are widely used by social media managers and creators. It's a suite of tools to simplify, your content workloads. Like Magic Write, Magic Media can create text and images. There's a number of effects and other really cool things you can do. Canva's integrated AI in some really creative ways, reformatting, resizing content for different platforms. It makes it easier to repurpose content. You have something that's sized for an Instagram post, you can tell it to resize it for a HD screen size for a digital signage. Then Buffer is another tool that's also, Bernard Marr writes, is also fantastic for those who need to republish content across many different networks. It's focused on the management of campaigns. And so its AI assistant function is designed to help you brainstorm ideas and instantly rewrite content with different tones and for different audiences. And it is built on OpenAI technology. And he says language processing is sophisticated and accurate, and the user interface is super simple and easy. I will add 2 more. One is Content Studio, powerful all-in-one social content platform that integrates solutions for crafting, scheduling, and analyzing social posts. And the AI assistant helps create posts and captions that encourage engagement. So it's focused on engagement. He says it's one of the most user-friendly single dashboard approach. Is very easy to jump straight into it. Then Adobe Express. Adobe was one of the first, with their Firefly engine, they were one of the first image generating tools that we wrote about to come out with ethically sourced AI image generation, because they owned all the images that were used to generate. So they were licensed, they were properly licensed, and they compensated creators. Now, I don't know how much they compensated creators, but I remember that being something this was for enterprise clients. They offered this ethically sourced AI image generation, which was a kind of beginning of that similar vein as Trust Tech, as you were talking about, Trust Tech. But anyway, so they've got a number of tools that lets you. They've got this Adobe Express he talks about, which is one of their offerings that's replaced some of their other tools like Adobe Spark to be able to jump straight in, do digital design tasks specifically suited towards small businesses and independent content creators. And there are 10 more. Go and look up on the show notes. One more thought on AI doesn't have to erode your critical thinking. Well, first off, maybe I should save this one for next week and ask Nadia if you have any more thoughts on anything else that we've talked about.
No, I just applaud you in trying to raise awareness. I mean, AI is not going away, so we have to find ways of making it work. And I do not trust governments to be the right bodies to do that. No disrespect to governments, but they're too slow. There's lots of other motivations for them to do things in there. I think, we have to start with people like us who are educators and influencers and fill that vessel with the good stuff. So the less good stuff disappears. It gets lost amongst the good.
Well, that's a really good point, because, talking about how you use AI and starting with us, that's where I found out this idea of really using AI to polish your critical thinking skills. And we'll get more into this next week. But I saw Bruce Clark wrote on Medium about how he took a Google AI keynote 2-hour video. He had it summarized by AI. Then he had it give a skeptical perspective. And ultimately, he generated a two-character debate, 20-minute civil debate on the larger issues being discussed back and forth between two people. And I thought that's fascinating. There's a lot of ways to use AI so it doesn't erode your critical thinking skills, whether it's having it poke holes in your logic, say, look at my report and say, what would a dismissive superior or boss say to, throw this out and say it's no good, and what did I miss? What is my reasoning lacking? What are some arguments that I didn't think of? Give me a skeptical perspective, play devil's advocate. And you start to get in the habit of thinking of your own content that way. It can improve. It's a critical thinking workout. It can be your thinking buddy if you know how to use it like that. Train your brain and use AI as a workout for that by having it give you counteractive, and you'll become more open to feedback, I feel like, and criticism if you get used to it from AI. Well, it is 1:30 London time, 7:30 Fort Worth time. And I am going to, Nadia, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to play the rest of the song by Parts and Spares, Scream When You Cry. And join us again next week. Paul will be back. And we thank you for coming and joining us today. Here's Parts and Spares.